You've just jumped inside the Pull Bag. Join TFG1Mike and the rest of the comic reading crew here at the GCRN as they make their great escape into comics. From DC, Marvel, IDW, Boom Studios, Zenoscope, and more, we have everything you want to read right here. Transformers comics? Yeah, we cover that. He-Man? Yeah, sure. DC superheroes like Batman, Batgirl, Nightwing, and Batman Beyond? Yep, we have those too. How about TMNT from IDW and I Hate Fairyland from Image Comics? Yeah, we have all that here. Plus, so much more. It's all inside the Pull Bag here on the Geekcast Radio Network. So without any further ado, it's time to talk about the comics we are reading right now here inside the Pull Bag.
Hello and welcome to episode 382 of the Pull Bag. I'm, of course, TFG1Mike. This is another Origins episode. As I've said before in the last couple of them that have had to, God, I can't talk. I've had to change the way that I've been doing these podcasts lately, and I've been kind of going the Origins route and getting people's stories of how they've gotten into or out of comic books. And today, it seems like I'm the third wheel, along with my lovely and special guests, the hosts of Married with Comics. See, third wheel. Jonathan and Maggie Schaefer-Hames. Hello.
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 Thanks for having us on the show.
Yes, thanks.
Absolutely. Of course, you know I'm only doing this because the Rod Pod needs more content, right?
It does. Yes, it does.
That was the agreement. Do a Rod Pod.
Actually, right after this, that's exactly what I'm going to be working on once we get done with this today. I'm going to go edit.
All right, so the Pull Bag has 25 new questions. Sort of. So if anyone's listened to the previous episodes besides, I think, the last... No, I did just come up with this after episode 360.5 with Mike Laidman, which was almost exactly a year ago. Anyway, it's fairly simple. Hopefully we'll have a good discussion out of it. Just to be clear, so it's easy for all of us, ladies will go first for the answers.
Woohoo!
Like we would have had a choice anyway.
That's right.
Come on. So that way I don't have to be like, there's sometimes in some things where I've talked to two or three people and I'm waiting for them to give an answer, and I'm like, this is where you answer the question now. Anyway. All right, 25 questions. You must answer in the form of an answer, not the form of a question. So there is that.
Damn.
Number one.
Write that down.
John goes and changes all of his notes.
Answer in form of.
Did you grow up reading comics, and at what age did you first remember reading or noticing comics, Maggie?
I did not grow up reading comics. I was more comics adjacent as a kid. I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series, the 90s X-Men cartoon, 90s Spider-Man, Gargoyles. I think they should be considered superheroes. Anyways, it wasn't until actually I was in high school and V for Vendetta came out in the movie theaters, and I went and saw it, and I wanted to read the graphic novel. So I went to Borders and I picked up V for Vendetta, and then that was the first comic book or graphic novel I'd ever read. Then I went back later and got Batman Returns. And then Dark Knight Returns. Sorry. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're here with me for this. And then later on, I read Watchmen. That was probably right after I graduated high school. And then Fun Home by Alison Bechdel were the only four any comic-related thing I'd ever read until I met John several years later. And it was actually more through him that I started to get more into comic books and become more familiar with the medium.
Very cool, very cool. What about you, John, as Astro Train decides to drive through my my apartment here? What about you? What's your growing up story as far as how you got into them or noticing them?
Tell Astro Train if he doesn't jettison some weight, he's never going to back Cybertron.
I know.
Oh, man. I don't remember a time I didn't read comic books. I mean, I was a very young child in the period of the 70s when there was the like TV golden age. The Batman Adam West shows were on syndication every day. And I, at about 3 years old, was obsessed with this show. I had this thing that was called an ATV Explorer. It was a little kid-sized little minivan, essentially, that you'd sit on.
Oh, yeah.
And it had a steering wheel on the top of it. And I made my mom put like a paper towel roll on the back for exhaust, because I think on the exhaust pipe that really resonated with little me. And there was also the Captain America and the Spider-Man TV shows. Very lived in the Hulk, and it was Spider-Man and the Hulk that became my big focus, as well as eventually the Superman Christopher Reeve movies. And I would get comic books as presents as when I was really young. The first one I remember, I had to look this up, it was Amazing Spider-Man 192. It's a story about the Fly, and Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man are handcuffed to an explosive device that will go off if they try to remove it, and they've got 24 hours to deal with that. And I learned how to reading that book.
That's really adorable to me. Such a good way to learn how to read with a comic book.
Yeah, and didn't like comic books. They didn't think they were a good thing for kids to read, but then basically eventually I would read literally anything I would get my hands on. So they were like, well, I might as well read these too, I guess.
Yeah, I started learning on reading from actual, not comics, but actual books as a preschooler and littler kid. I started on Golden Books and then went to Berenstain Bears, and my very first and only Transformers book back in the day that I read was it costs a fortune now, but it was a library book. It was a Transformers story with Wheelie in it. That's all I remember. I can look at it on eBay and stuff, and once I see the cover, I know exactly what it is. But all I can tell you is it's an actual kids' story book that is like Wheelie's origin or something.
Yeah, it was like his bit in the Transformers the movie. Yeah. I remember this one. I remember Wheelie, my name. Wheelie, ask same.
Yep. Yeah.
Why can't I ever find keys? This I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Then from there, it was like at the barber shop, he had a big stack of comic books to keep kids quiet, and I would.
John grew up in Mayberry, obviously.
I did, yes. When Floyd, the drunken barber. He had a bunch of comics, and I would remember reading through those, and I would occasionally get stuff with my allowance. I know that the first comic I bought for myself with my allowance was Transformers 17. I remember that one specifically because which fans of other appearances of us were going to be on Transformers Chronicles on the Long Box Crusade, where we talk about that one probably next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, it'll be slightly after this one comes out. So, hooray.
Timing, people. It's all about the timing.
Yeah.
And speaking of timing, this next question probably doesn't apply to Maggie at all, sadly. As a kid, was there a parent, a friend, or who just said, "Here, kid, read this comic and go away, you bother me," just to shut you up and say, "Hey, here's Batman, go deal with it"?
I really go deal with it. I really wish that someone had. My parents got divorced when I was pretty little, and Batman and Indiana Jones were the two, and Star Wars and Star Trek were all things that my dad would watch with me when I was a little kid. And for some reason, it never occurred to either my dad or my mom to give me a comic book. It didn't even occur to me that these were characters from comic books until way later when I realized what comic books were. I'm someone who I graduated high school in 2008. So I don't really know exactly where comic books were then, but I didn't have any friends who read comics. I was never given any. It was something that eventually I just kind of sought out for myself. And even then, it wasn't anything I was super interested in. I had kind of a snobby attitude towards them when I was, late teens, early 20s. So they just never blipped my radar. And that has since changed, which I appreciate, and I like trying new things. And there's been several comic series that I've read now that I have really enjoyed, and some that I've not enjoyed, and it's just like reading anything else or engaging in any other kind of medium. You take what you like and you leave what you don't like. And I'm glad that John kind of opened that up for me a little bit. And he was the first one who really said, hey, if you like the Batman movies, why don't you try reading this one? And that would have been a much better introduction than me going to Borders and for the first time ever seeing rows and rows of Batman comics and thinking, oh my God, there's this much Batman? I had no idea. And I didn't know where to start. It was overwhelming. So that's why I think I just kind of randomly grabbed Dark Knight Returns because I liked the art when I was flipping through it. I had no idea who Miller was, like none of that. Everything was new. So yeah, it would have been nice if someone had done that when I was a little bit younger, but I've got it now. So that's good.
There you go. That's all that matters. Mm-hmm. John, you've kind of already touched on your story, but was there anything as a kid that pointed you in the right direction? You mentioned your dad and stuff.
Definitely the barbershop would have been like the first place that because I was going there from when I was like 3 and 4 years old, and that was the place I saw them as something that existed that you can read. There were spinner racks and at the drugstore when I would follow that, but I think the first time that somebody actually said, "Here, kid," it would have been my older cousin Chris. When I was, that was when I was probably in like 7th or 8th grade, because I think it was at that period of time where I had put away childish things because I was like all grown up now and after girls, and my cousin said, here's these Frank Miller comics, read these. And here's these Denny O'Neil Green Arrow, Green Lantern comics, read these. And I was absolutely hooked after that.
Mm-hmm. When you were a kid, which characters were your favorites?
Batman. Batman has always been my favorite ever since I was a kid. And you're going to have to remind me which one that I like, which Batman movie. Is it Batman Returns?
Yeah, Batman Forever.
Forever. Yes. I love
Thank
Batman
God.
Forever. Ever since I was a kid, that movie has been one of my favorites. I eventually got to see the Adam West movie. I never got to see his the television show. It wasn't on or available when I was a kid, but I did get to see his movie and I really liked that. So Batman has always been very near and dear to my heart. And that has only very recently been expanded to include other characters like Wonder Woman and Swamp Thing. Batman was always number one for me.
Batman Forever gets such a bad rap. Like, I just don't like.
Yeah, John doesn't like it.
And I understand that people don't like it, and that's their thing, and that's fine. I get it. But out of those 4 movies, that's not the worst one.
No, it is not.
Not by a long shot.
And I'm going to get some heresy here, but frankly, none of those 4 movies are really all that good.
Well, I would agree with that too.
I don't think Batman Forever is the greatest constructed movie, and there's some silliness in it, but it's Batman.
I think I was just the right age when I saw that in the theater.
But it does have my favorite part in any of those movies, which I love Jim Carrey's "riddle me this, riddle me that" part. That was when I watched it in the theater as a younger person. I got actual chills at that moment. It's a very well put together scene.
Mm-hmm.
I look at those 4 films at the time that they were being made and the limitations at the time, like the technology back. Like if they made those exact movies today, maybe tweak the plot a little bit, but with the technology they have today, those movies would be just as popular as the Marvel Cinematic Universe if they were made today. My personal ranking of those, notice folks, I said personal ranking, so this is my own thing here.
Man after my own heart.
89 Forever, Batman and Robin, and Batman Returns is dead last because that story is so dumb.
You're not wrong. Christopher Walken almost saved that movie, but then you remember there's no reason for Christopher Walken to be in this movie every time.
So weird that he's even in it.
I do love his son, the Christopher Walken mini-me.
Yeah.
In this.
Yeah.
Man, Danny would have been such a perfect freaking penguin if they would have written a penguin that wasn't some sort of weird, freakish
penguin person.
If
they'd done like a true penguin with him, I think he would have made a very good Oswald Cobblepot.
I think so too. He's supposed to be dapper and debonair. It would have been great seeing Danny pulling that off. I mean, he's a
definitely
good actor.
I just thought it was weird that George Clooney ever played Batman too. That still blows my mind to this day.
I am the biggest Batman and Robin apologist that you will meet.
Really? That's
Absolutely.
Probably my least favorite is the George Clooney.
Actually, you're not, because I can trump you.
Yeah? Oh, you apologize for that?
No politician intended.
That's good.
But I apologize for that movie all the time because I enjoy that. Okay, so that you talk about a time that came out at the right time. 1997, I was 17 years old. Since I think The Crush in 93, I had the biggest crush on Alicia Silverstone. And when I saw she was going to be Batgirl, I'm like, sold. I'll see the movie. I don't care who's in it. I don't care whatever. The interesting thing is, sadly, since Mr. Schumacher has passed away recently, in the last, I forget when it's been a couple of months since Joel Schumacher died. They released, I think on the DC or the Warner Brothers YouTube channel, a special cover, like the DVD specials or whatever it is that are on the box sets. The specials where they have Joel talking about both Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. There was these two special things, and it's one big YouTube video. I'll send it to you guys afterwards, where he talks about it and where all the other people involved with it talk about it, including Val Kilmer at the time, because this was back when they originally did this is not. I'm so sad and depressed with what has happened to Val Kilmer with his cancer and everything. Oh man, it's just so. Anyway, the point is, in that special, they say, and Val specifically says, they never called his people. He was supposed to be, like, he had some conflict or something at the time, but he was supposed to be in Batman and Robin. Clooney was a backup.
Oh.
Yeah.
How strange to have George Clooney as your backup.
Clooney, as far as, material aside, I like Clooney's portrayal of Bruce Wayne. I thought he did his relationship with Alfred is probably the closest thing to a realistic relationship in any of those movies. I like their chemistry a lot, although I believe that George Clooney has said he was playing him gay, which makes that even funnier to watch again now. So.
I will agree with the Alfred part as far as the whole family thing and everything else, but I feel that Val got Bruce's psychological stuff done a lot better. Because if you look at Batman Forever, that's really, yes, there are silly parts with the villains and whatever, but you look at the way that Val plays Bruce in Batman, he plays a better Bruce than he does Batman, but it's more psychological than just what people remember with The Fugitive and Ace Ventura. So since we're talking about all this Batman stuff, question 4 is the age-old question: DC or Marvel?
Both.
Mostly Marvel for me.
These days, I don't know. Because I've been kind of trying to get onto a sort of an independent bent a little bit too, and trying to see things from creators to either DC or Marvel. For a long time, I was definitely DC all the way, but more recently, I think I've become much more to prefer Marvel than DC, which is, I know what happened.
I'm a mostly Marvel, except for a period of time in the 1990s, the very early 1990s to the mid to late 90s. I was almost completely reading DC, but other than that, Marvel generally hits areas that I like a little more.
Yeah, it's one of those things where for me it's about characters, it's not about the companies.
Right.
You take Iron Man, you take Spider-Man, you take Captain America. At some point in their 80x number of however many years any of them have been around, there's stories in there that are really good, whether it's a reboot story, whether it's a original timeline story. Same thing with DC. DC has had the He-Man stuff, so I like that.
Mhm.
They have the Batman Beyond stuff that they've been doing for a long time now. I enjoy that. And it just depends. Honestly, at this point, I prefer Dick Grayson as Batman than Bruce Wayne, but that's just me. Because Gates of Gotham was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So as Maggie said, she's on an independent kick and everything else. The next question is, what other publishers do you enjoy reading?
I once, when John and I were at our local comic shop, saw an issue of Lady Mechanica by Joe Benitez, and it is his own. He publishes it under his own. It's Joe Benitez Productions, and he does the writing, I think, and the art as well for it. And he's got a couple other people who help with the art too. Also IDW, obviously, because IDW Phase 2 Transformers is what we cover over on the Rod Pod, and I love them. There was another one too. I can't remember now.
Read some Image.
Image, yeah, is another one as well.
I Hate Fairyland is amazing.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. You would like that.
Oh, I was going to say, I know not of that. Yeah, that sounds like something.
Oh, no, you would love it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Just off the top of my head, without actually switching off any windows or moving anything on my phone other than the script that I'm reading from with these questions, basically this little girl gets trapped in this place called Fairyland, and it ages her to the point where in the real world she's God knows how long, but in the Fairyland she still looks like a kid, but she's actually like 37 years old. And she has to fight all these things, and it's by Scotty Young. She has to fight all these things to try to get out of Fairyland, and it takes cursing to a whole new level and a whole new comedic level. They change it, like, you muffin fluffers, like he does all that. It's hilarious. One of the first panels, I think, in one of the first couple issues, is she kills the moon. I'm like, oh my god, it's so hilarious. Get it in trade. It's on Comixology. It's amazing.
Cool, definitely.
What about you, John? For publishers and other things, obviously IDW and all that, but
I like IDW. I probably, besides Marvel and DC, IDW is the one I'm looking at most. I mean, I'm just starting to get into their Ninja Turtle stuff. That's gonna take me a while to plow through, but I loved Gem by IDW is so much fun. It is so much fun because I loved Gem as a kid. I loved it as much as I loved the Transformers and G.I. Joe comics. They were all, or cartoons. They were all in the same universe as far as I was concerned, and they share a couple characters, so they are. But they
share a number of voice actors, and I know back then we weren't thinking about the voice actors, but now that we are, it's like, hey, Samantha Newark is Jem, Jerrica and Jem, obviously, but she was also Optimus Prime's girlfriend on Transformers, so they're in the same universe.
That's cool. Huh, that's neat. I like Jem too. I like that cartoon.
It always surprises me when everybody's like, but Jem's a girl cartoon. Have you watched it lately? Seriously, the first episode, there's car chases, there's, all kinds of mischief and everything else and mayhem. Oh, yeah. It's like, it's not just for girls. Like,
no.
I must have missed that when I was a kid, because I loved Gem. Mm-hmm. I looked forward to Gem being on as much as, catching a Transformers or G.I. Joe, because That's was cool. More, it didn't matter to me, if it was a boy or a girl protagonist, it was the things that they were doing. And she was...
Exactly.
We were a bit obsessed by holograms in the 80s for like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it was really weird. But therefore, Gem and the holograms was the coolest thing ever.
I think Gargoyles was my equivalent. Gargoyles seems like it was geared maybe more towards boys, but I flippin' loved that show. It's on the Disney Plus app, and I've been watching it, and I still love that show. I love Gargoyles.
It's so great.
And it's got all the Star Trek people you could ever possibly want. There's so many Star Trek people who do voices on that show. It's insane.
Man will walk on his knees into hell if you pay him enough.
Yeah, I mean, you look again. It's all about timing. You look at the '80s and you look at Transformers, G.I. Joe, Gem, Mask. Mask, not necessarily so much, but Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Jem, because they were all Sunbow Productions, all of their voice actors crossed over.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I'm trying to remember if this is right. No, sadly, I don't think Peter Cullen did any Jem stuff, but I know he did other stuff in other things that were Sunbow related. But it's like, and that's the time, like John said, back then, in the 80s, we were all obsessed with holograms, whether we were little kids or adults. And in the 90s, it's, hey, we have all this popular Star Trek stuff, so let's create something else and put the Star Trek people as voices in this cartoon about gargoyles.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that was Jonathan Frakes himself was basically going, hey, I know some people.
I love Jonathan Frakes. He's one of my favorite people. He's so cool.
He's very frosty.
Yes.
All right. Print or digital? Which one? Both? Either or? And why?
Reading comic books on our tablets, when you can do the panel by panel view.
The guided view. Yep.
Yeah. It lends a sort of cinematic quality to your reading experience that is really cool. However, at the same time, being someone who loves a good paperback, I do like having the physical copy as well. I think I retain things a little bit better if I read it off paper than if I read it off of a screen. And there's just something about holding, a book in your hand and that smell. Even old comic books get that nice old book kind of smell too. And there's something about that visceral experience that I really like too. So I'm kind of an either or. And sometimes it sort of depends on the comic book, because I think some lend themselves really well to that guided panel by panel, whereas other ones could be fine either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For modern comics, for me, I definitely prefer digital for individual issues, just because for some reason I don't mind paying, $3.99 or whatever for something digitally that's only that much content, but to actually go, here's my money, give me a few pieces of paper stapled together, thank you.
There is a problem with it, yes.
Right. But I think most of my comic reading now is on either Comixology or Marvel Unlimited or the DCU, which is where I'm consuming most. I like, if it's a story arc by a creator I really like to have like the epic collections, like the Fantastic Four. Those are nice. That's a nice sized amount that you can take and have a chunk of books to read for a while. I mean, I love, your mom bought me the Superman Exile Omnibus, which I absolutely love, but do not drop this on your foot.
No.
So it's tricky. They're hard to read.
Because the book is so big.
Because the book is so big. I mean, it's gorgeous and all of those things, and I love having it, and I would never part with that. But it's
unwieldy.
It's unwieldy.
Bone's kind of the same way. We have the Bone Omnibus as well. But that, I think at this point, the spine's been creased enough that it kind of holds itself open very nicely. But that's another big book.
Right.
It's huge.
Bone definitely lends itself to be read as one.
Yeah.
Like one giant thing.
That's definitely how I prefer to read comic books. I'm not as keen on getting individual issues because they seem like it's almost like birthday cards. They're nice, but then you just get rid of them afterwards. And comic books are individual copies are kind of like that to me.
Wait a minute. We have to explore this, because how long have you guys been married?
Well, we've been married a little over 2 years. We've been together for about 7.
Okay. So in almost 9 years, you've gotten rid of every birthday card John has ever given you.
John's actually... Have you gotten me birthday card? I think early on in our relationship, you probably did. I have a couple that I have held on to for sentimental reasons, for sure. But there's been plenty that I was like, oh, that's nice. And I put it up to look at for about a week or so after my birthday, and then they get recycled. I don't know. I don't keep them.
We really do tend to be about non-attachment on things like that, too, mostly because we're trying to move. So we're getting ready.
Well, that's an aspect of we've got a couple of short boxes that are full of individual comics, and we have to move a good 2.5 hours away from here in a couple of months. And I'm thinking, okay, so do we want all of these individual issues? And if so, is there a better way that we could maybe display them? and we could have like our own little spinner rack and kind of rotate the comics that we have on the spinner rack and things like that. But otherwise, they just sit in a box.
Mike Gillis does that.
Well, and the Comic Tropes guy does that too, and I really like it. I think it's cool. But I don't know. Maybe that's just because I don't have like sentimental attachment to a lot of individual comic issues, because this is still a relatively new thing for me. And I like reading collected stories where I can read it from beginning to end.
We are going way beyond just question.
Sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. This is what the whole, this is what the show is about. If a tangent happens, it happens. Like going back to the birthday card thing, I still have two full 1990s Nike shoe boxes filled with birthday cards from the last 40 years of my life.
That's nice, though.
I used to as well. I had to make a personal choice at one point. Once I realized, okay, I have moved 4 times.
Yeah.
I have moved these boxes through 4 different places, and I have not looked in them any of those times. They are obviously not sparking joy.
That's right. Marie Kondo.
And when it comes to like you guys are saying, having to pack up for moving and whatever else, here's my suggestion. If it's single issues, whether you display them or not, if they're just single issues that you don't, that, like say you've already read them, you already know what the story is, say you want to donate them or whatever else, just go get the single issue on Comixology. Well, you still have the story.
And actually, that's kind of what we've been doing, is converting John's comic collection more into a digital collection, just because it is significantly more convenient. And I hate to say that sounds so shallow, but it's true.
Well,
it's nice to have them
manageable. It's convenient and manageable, and that's
absolutely, because you can get, I think, really easily overwhelmed with individual comic issues. I can't even imagine before we were together how many issues you might have had, that you've gotten rid of and cycled through. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a question down the line here. So, getting into the meat and potatoes of some comic stuff, who are some of your favorite comics writers and why?
I have my list. Okay. I love, the first person I want to mention is Matt Fraction, because his current run on Jimmy Olsen is phenomenal. And it actually just wrapped up fairly recently, and I've been a couple issues behind. So I'm going to start from the beginning and just read them all through again. But I loved his Jimmy Olsen, and his Hawkeye was really good as well. What else? You mentioned something else he did?
Oh, tons of things.
Oh, I mean, he's done lots.
Oh, it's Iron Man.
Iron Man, you said, was also really good. Yeah. So I'm quite a big fan of Matt Fraction. J.M. DeMatteis, I cannot not mention him, because JLI is one of my favorite things ever. In fact, I think it was JLI was one of the first series that John said, why don't you give this a try? And it was the first time that a comic book made me laugh out loud. And that immediately endeared me to the story. And I've read a good chunk of it, but there's plenty of it that I haven't read yet. We've only got the one omnibus. And I don't think I've even made it through that yet. Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyways, so J.M. DeMatteis, Gail Simone for Wonder Woman, and honestly, anything that she writes, including her Twitter feed, because she's amazing and she's very funny. Amazing. Yes. She's so good.
Oh my God.
And her Wonder Woman, she is the best troll ever. She's hilarious. I love her Twitter. But her Wonder Woman was amazing. And I really liked that. That was the first Wonder Woman I probably ever read, was Gail Simone's. And I was very impressed by that. And then, of course, because as of the recording of this, I finished reading Bone yesterday. Jeff Smith is definitely one of my favorite comic writers of all time. Bone is incredible. It's so good. Those are some of my favorites.
All right. So before John gives his answers, number 1, Matt Fraction, if you haven't already, from Image, Sex Criminals.
Sex Criminals was amazing.
You guys have to read that.
Okay.
And the sad thing is, now that I'm thinking about that story, John, have you read the whole thing or some of it or part of it, John?
I can't remember if I've read it all. I don't think I have.
You've read at least like the first couple issues and things?
Yes.
Okay, so the sad thing is, right now, I'm not thinking it's John and Susie. I'm thinking it's John and Maggie.
You'll get that joke there.
I was going to say, I don't know what this means, but now I have I Hate Fairyland and Sex Criminals written down, so I will remember.
Absolutely. Sex Criminals is amazing.
Okay.
And then Gail, obviously. For me, Gail, when I found her, it was her Batgirl run. And man, I wish they'd put her on Batgirl again. I don't know who's on it current. I know there's somebody writing the Rebirth stuff now, but I wish they'd put her back on a Batgirl title because I loved Gail's Batgirl run.
She's awesome.
Okay, John, writers for you, sir.
Oh man. Well, there's a few. I do love Gail Simone as well, with her through Birds of Prey, her Batgirl, her Deadpool stuff. If you have not read,
I have to read her Deadpool.
Is pretty great. Gail Simone has as much to do with the current depiction of Deadpool as anybody does.
Oh,
really.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Grant Morrison, I'm a big fan of his like gonzo meta way of looking at the universe and the occasional glimpses he gives into his brain. Mark Waid, I will generally like anything he does, just because he will have respect for the character that he's writing and still give a new twist on it. He's not going to come in there and break everything just to be controversial and get things like that. Neil Gaiman, his Sandman is Sandman comic. If Bone isn't Sandman's probably the best comic series that's a self-contained one that I've ever read. I like Brian Michael Bendis until I didn't.
Oh no, we got to hear this story.
Well, it's mostly Ultimate Spider-Man is an incredible series. There's some, in all ways, even before Miles and after Miles, and once Miles shows up, it's a shot in the arm that it needed to go, and it was a very bright spot in what had really gone wrong with the Ultimate Universe at that point. But I like him. I loved when they brought him in to do the regular Avengers. I kind of like that tone. I think comic books needed that sort of thing at the time. But as it went on and as he became everywhere, it for me became just a bunch of comics with people that talk like this, like this, like this. And then when he went over to Superman, I was reading that. I was interested in the new take on that, even though I liked where Superman was at that point. He was really making him interesting. He was doing some fun stuff. And then suddenly he started going it away with where he had to show about the Lois Lane loves Clark so much that she constantly is lying to him. And then his identity. And then I'm like,
Gotcha.
And somewhere about halfway through the first Legion of Superheroes, when every member of the Legion of Superheroes talks like Peter Parker in Ultimate Spider-Man, I was like, sorry, Brian, I'm done with you. But his Daredevil is still one of my favorite comics of all time.
There you go.
Old school writers, I love Roger Stern, Marv Wolfman, Jonathan Hickman and Dan Slott. Their current stuff I like a lot, and also J.M. DeMatteis, both on his JLI and his Spider-Man and various other things he's done. I will always read anything by any of those people.
He did a House of Mystery. I was just reading the J.M. DeMatteis did. He did it's called something with blood. It's about a vampire. And they're kind of cool. I read a bunch of those on the DC app like a week or so ago, actually. I was just dorking around. And I was like, J.M. DeMatteis wrote for House of Mystery? No way. That was really cool to find. I love him. He's so funny. He's great. And those books aren't funny, but they're good. They're good.
What defines a good story to you?
Ooh.
Oh, boy. I would start off with, like, authenticity. I need to be able to believe the story that I'm reading. I like characters that behave like the characters behave, I guess is kind of the idea. I have this sort of, this idea in my head of who this character is, and I like to read stories that sort of exemplify those aspects of that character.
Cisco
wants to get out of the room.
Our cat Cisco wants to be on the podcast so badly, but we've told him that
he can't read yet. No.
I like stories that I like stories by creators, especially writers, that really understand the character that they are doing. Whether or not they're depicting the character in a way that I would, or things like that. I like that when somebody gets down to the core of why this character is good. Spider-Man is an example of one that people either get or don't. Superman's another one. But with Spider-Man, just like Dan Slott, for example, took Spider-Man and managed to deconstruct him by taking him out of his normal situation in a strange way. He actually gave him success. He gave him a job. He gave him tons of money. He was a successful person to examine the fact, what then of Spider-Man, of Peter Parker remains? Can you do something like that and still make it and with Captain America, when you have Sam Wilson as Captain America with Nick Spencer's, both with Sam Wilson as Captain America or with the story of Captain America getting cosmic cubed into a Hydra agent. Those are both great examinations of why you like a character. And when a writer can go and do something like that, it can take something that takes you, the reader, out of your comfort zone, but keeps you coming back for more. Right. That I really appreciate, especially these days, because I can go, if I want something to be just the same as it was forever, I can go back and read tons of old stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are certain things that draw you into certain stories. How I got into the IDW Phase 2 books for Transformers, somebody mentioned Shadowplay and other things, and I'm like, okay, what did they do to Shockwave? What did Shockwave do to them? Okay, I now have to read all 13 plus years of this stuff now.
With the IDW books, it's humor is something that's always going to get me. I like a balance of humor and gravitas. And I think the IDW books do a good job with balancing that kind of tone. And I also really like the characters and how there's such a big cast, but every Transformer has their own personality, and it's easy to tell them apart. They don't all look the same and they don't all behave the same. And I enjoy that. So I like good, strong characters, and I do like humor, but I also like things that are a little dark and heavy sometimes too. And the IDW books have a little bit of everything.
So you kind of have answered the next question. We can go into more depth or more clarity, I guess. What does a story have to draw you in? Now, Maggie, you did just say about, the comedy and also the dark parts to it as well. What about you, John?
I like that as well in certain things. Basically, for a comic to draw me in is that, comics are, there's a formula with how a comic draws you in. It's got a cover that makes me want to go, hey, there's something in this comic I might want to do. It'll give me a splash page to show me. A number of things can do that, and I am a sucker for pretty much all of them. If a comic book has people with word balloons talking about, oh no, Superman's turned into some sort of monkey hornet or something. How will we stop him? Yeah, I'm going to read that thing.
2021, the monkey murder hornets come after us all.
I'm sorry that I retroactively created the monkey murder hornets, you guys. It's a strange year in that monkey's paw. I keep forgetting it's right here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy. All right, who are some of your favorite artists?
I like Jim Aparo's art in Batman a lot. I'm going to go with Jeff Smith again as well for art, because the art in Bone is also very, very good. Nick Roche, his art for More Than Meets the Eye in the IDW Phase 2 books, I really like his style. And Joe Benitez with Lady Mechanica. He's done a few other things, none of which else I've read, and he really hasn't done a whole bunch. When I did a fireside favorite on one of the Lady Mechanica issues, and it was set in during the Day of the Dead. So there were all these really bright colors too, because you've got like the sugar skulls and carnations and candles, and people with their faces painted. And it was so vibrant and at the same time really dark, because then at the end of the issue, they get attacked by zombies. And it's this kind of Victorian steampunk style of art, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I really like that art a lot.
Oh, I'm much more of a writer person than an artist person, so I always, especially modern ones, I have trouble remembering who's who. I'm learning my take on that. I do love pretty much everybody that's involved in IDW Transformers in one way or another, especially as it goes on. For old school, I like the Buscema's a lot. Sal Buscema's Marvel Universe is what the Marvel Universe looks like when I close my eyes. In the 1980s, like Avengers sort of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Jurgens, I don't know, John Byrne, I usually like, especially his early stuff into the 80s. He gets a little lazier as he goes on.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on all the Transformers artists and how fluid yet different it all seems. If I was going to have to, like, if somebody put a fusion cannon to my head and say, pick one artist, I'm sorry, everybody, but I got to go with Livio Ramondelli.
Oh,
The man does amazing things. I need to commission that guy at some point once I, go rob a bank. All right. Do you have a favorite non-superhero title? You've already mentioned Bone, Maggie, and some others, but just something that is not a superhero title, not necessarily a superhero from either company, but just something that's completely different.
I once read, and I don't remember because I didn't write this one down. I don't remember who wrote it, but John introduced me to Mouse Guard. And Mouse Guard is wonderful. And it's mice. It's kind of like the Redwall series, if anyone's familiar with those books by what's his name? Jacques.
Far less twee.
Right, yeah, a little less cutesy, but nevertheless, they are mice with little swords and, armor and heraldry and everything like that.
David Peterson is the name of the writer and artist of that.
Thank you. I loved Mouse Guard. And unfortunately, because they were done by seasons, and I think there's only fall and winter, because there aren't all four. There are only 2 books that I ever read, and I couldn't find any more beyond those, which was really unfortunate. But what I did read and what I did find, I really, really liked. And that was not superhero at all.
I like Knights of the Dinner Table by Kenzer and Company. It's a very... it's a story about people playing the Hackmaster, which is the D&D sort of game, and the wacky shenanigans that they get into that I enjoy quite a bit.
Oh, so. The D&D comics in general are actually kind of fun to read too.
I do love Chip Zdarsky's Rick and Morty. Is that Jim Zub?
Jim Zub
does that
Rick
one.
And Morty, yeah.
Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons is pretty great.
It
if you are a fan of either or both of those, it's really one of the best adaptations besides their core form of those 2 properties I've ever seen.
I'm looking forward to reading Transformers and My Little Pony. That's going to be awesome.
Man, can you believe that Transformers is so good at crossing over with these strange things? Mike, have you read? You've read them. Like Transformers Ghostbusters should not have been as good as it was.
I have not read that yet. It's on my Comixology wish list. Again, things have... Absolutely. Life happens, folks, but I plan on reading them. I have read
the Star Trek. You read?
Yeah, well, that was episode 375 of the show. I read that. I'll give it this. It was a lot better than that animated series originally ever was. Thank God. But yeah, IDW and their crossovers, man, they've got Transformers My Little Pony coming up. They just announced Transformers Back to the Future. Just like, and even the Turtles crossovers. Once you get into the Turtle stuff, John, make sure you read it from the beginning. And there, I can send you a link to a forum page that lists the full order you're supposed to read them in, so that way you get it in full story order. But man, they've done 2 different TMNT Ghostbuster crossovers in the past, and those were really, really good because it's basically 2 versions of New York.
Right. And the Batman ones were pretty great too.
Yeah, the Batman ones are amazing. I have not read Batman TMNT 3 yet. I need to add that to my list at some point.
I didn't know it was out.
Oh yeah, it's been out. Batman TMNT 3. I'm pretty sure it's. I don't know if it's out in trade yet, but I know that the anyway.
Well, the last couple of months have taken 3 years each, so I don't know anything that happened outside of.
Yeah.
I mean, really, honestly, I'm not surprised that we're not up to the 23rd century yet or something. I don't know. It's a whole different. Whole different world we live in now.
Yes.
All right. Is there, or what is your favorite run on a series? So let's say Detective Comics. Is there a specific storyline within that, or Snyder's Batman, or even Denny O'Neil's Batman? I mean, I don't, I say Snyder because at least modern comics, you at least have certain story arcs like, Court of Owls or Death of the Family or that kind of thing.
I really liked Grant Morrison's run on Batman. I liked the Bat God. There was something about that I found very appealing. I really liked also, and John, you're going to have to help me remember some of these, I think, a little bit too, but Bloom, when Jim Gordon was...
That's Scott Snyder and
Greg
Snyder. Capullo.
Oh, okay, yeah. I like those as well. I think I read all of those. Who else have I really liked? You can help me with this.
Mark Waid's Daredevil, you were a big fan of.
That's right. I'm not Daredevil.
I'm not Daredevil.
Oh, he's got his horns. I like that too. Oh, I also really liked the She-Hulk with her super paralegal that I always want to say is Dan Slott.
You like the Dan Slott one. You didn't actually read very many of the...
No, but I should have read more of that. And I do intend to get back to it because I really liked She-Hulk. It was because she's a character I wouldn't have otherwise thought to have read. And I want to read more of that. Same with Immortal Hulk. I want to read more of that too. Because that's just a character that has never interested me at all, was Hulk. And then I found out that there was a She-Hulk too. And I was like, wait, really? So those are two that I want to explore more.
Yeah, you got to love Jennifer because she's awesome.
She is awesome.
I love every She-Hulk run ever.
No, do you?
I do.
Okay. Well, that's impressive. 5 out of 5 stars. Would read again.
Yes, Batman TMNT 3 was released. The trade was released April of this year. But yeah, the story was 6 issues and did conclude. So
awesome.
I sent the Comixology link to you in Messenger, so that way you guys have it for later.
Oh, cool.
Okay, where are we going from here? Any other favorite run of series you guys want to mention?
I've got, besides Dan Slott's She-Hulk is definitely one for me. Let's see. Roger Stern, Sal Buscema's Avengers run in the 1980s is a big favorite of mine, as well as Stern's Amazing Spider-Man run. A lot of Hulk runs. I love Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk. I think it's going to be up there with me personally as one of the best runs of the character. And that character has had a lot of great runs that I love. I mean, everybody talks about Peter David's run, but there's Bill Mantlo, Sal Buscema, in the 1980s laid the groundwork for that run of turning the Hulk from something that was basically a very boring character into a psychologically interesting character. He was and the wind is blowing, so this might sound interesting.
Just glad that there's a breeze.
Yeah, it's going to get so hot here today. Yeah, Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema really... Bill created this psychologically interesting character by creating the repressed memories of Bruce Banner's his father, and Sal Buscema could draw the Hulk both as a very childlike monster or an absolutely horrifying savage, depending on what the state of. And he kind of created the idea of the Hulk having different personalities that Peter David picked up and just ran to Timbuktu with.
I think my issue with that sometimes is because I could still consider myself relatively new to comics. I bounce around a lot. So I'll read a couple issues of something, but then my attention will get grabbed by something else and I'll go and read that for a little while. And sometimes I'll go back and finish a run, but a lot of times I just kind of hop around and rely on John to help me keep the plot lines all straight in my head because there's so much. And knowing where to start, and trying to avoid the things that I don't like to see in comic books too. It's a difficult thing to navigate sometimes. So I do tend to bounce from thing to thing to thing, just to try to gain some experience with different kinds of characters. Batman was always like my first kind of gateway, but now I want to read about more things. So I've read little chunks and bits and pieces of a lot of different things.
And that reminds me, speaking of things, both Mark Waid's and Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four runs are two of my absolute favorite comic book runs of any character in them, because the Fantastic Four are my favorite comic books.
And also, speaking of things, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing was one of my favorite series that I've ever read. I loved his Swamp Thing. I love Swamp Thing. He's so cool.
Mm-hmm. He's Moss Man's brother. Anyway, that's a crossover, folks.
It was great.
Yeah. What is one comic you can read over and over again, single issue or trade?
One of my answers would be almost any Golden Age Batman, because Golden Age Batman is hilarious and I love them. I love that era where they were storytelling and the characters were so different and everything was still very new and kind of nascent. And I love the crazy gonzo stories that came out of the Golden Age. I could read those forever and a day. Otherwise, I'm trying to think. Do you have one that you would read over and over again?
Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Spider-Man run. Oh, I'm reading it right now after I had just read it a bit ago for something else. That plus the John Byrne Fantastic Four run too, I think, and anything in the Mike Carlin Superman era.
Yeah, for me, just because this is a new question, because when I did my Origins episode, we didn't have these questions back then. It's pretty much Kyle Higgins' run on Nightwing in New 52. I can read that entire series over and over again. For just a single trade, Tom Zoller's Long Distance.
Okay.
It's a romance comic, but it's really good. He also did a digital, if you guys know of Line Webtoon, he did a thing on their digital service. It's free, so there's whatever. Called Warning Label. It's another romance comic, but it is absolutely geeky and hilarious, and I think you guys would love it. Basically, these two people meet up, and the girl, when the guy goes to ask her out, she goes, hang on a second, you might want to wait a minute. And the whole bar ends up on fire, and this giant warning label shows up. So basically she's cursed. And he's like, curses? Those are a thing? She's like, how do you not know this? And so she's cursed. And basically anyone goes to ask her out, this warning label shows up, basically with her leading with her worst qualities first. And it is just absolutely hilarious. I'll send you guys links to the stuff afterwards, but Long Distance and Warning Label, I can read those. I literally I have the physical trade to Long Distance, and I have the digital version. I've read that book at least 20 or more times.
Oh, wow.
It's so fun. Okay, so you mentioned it earlier, Maggie, and not that we want to be negative in these questions. However, there are certain things we do try to avoid. So the question actually is, are there comics you avoid altogether? But basically, what is it you don't want in your comics?
One of the things that really bothers me in comic books is the depiction of their female characters. I don't like... Oh, what was it? We were just watching something on YouTube yesterday, and it was Comic Tropes, this YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about the Fantastic Four, and it was in the 90s, and it was Sue Storm's costume with the four cutout and her like stomach exposed, and she looked like a hooker. And I did not recognize her when I saw her, and John said, yeah, that's Sue. And I was like, that's Sue? That was horrible. I am so tired of the narrow waist, thigh gap, big boobs thing that they do with female characters, and it's so pervasive, it's almost hard to avoid it. Especially like with Catwoman, that really bothers me. Whenever they do something like that with their rather acrobatic and gymnastic-y kind of characters, those women who are able to do those things have a certain physique, and it is not Catwoman's physique. It really bothers me that there is such a reluctance to depict different kinds of body types amongst any comic book character. but certainly with the female characters. That's why I really appreciate like She-Hulk, because she's big and buff and she's so cool and badass. And then there's Squirrel Girl, who's rounder and curvier, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'd like to see more realistic, and I understand these are comic books and they're not based in reality, but at least a slightly more respectful take on the female form, I would really appreciate. It just is something that really rubs me the wrong way and will immediately make me put something down. If I find it to be too egregious, I will not read it anymore. Because art can really affect your, experience when you're reading a book. And bad art, even if it's a really good story, will still turn me off of the story.
Right. As a quick follow-up before John gives his answer, do you feel that it's gotten worse or better over time with artists drawing the female form?
I think it's getting a little bit better. If nothing else, at least it's not quite as skeezy and full of male gaze. I'm glad that there are more women actually, and getting a chance to write bigger titles so that we can and draw different titles too. So we can. I think that is important. Yeah, and I hope that progress continues on. But I also find it to be really disrespectful of the character. Like when I saw that Sue Storm, I was like, she's a much better character than she doesn't deserve that. You can draw her with her full body Fantastic Four suit and she looks just fine. You don't have to sexualize every woman. It's just not necessary. And I think there is less of that now. And I think that is a good thing.
I don't know what that was. That was not AstroTrain, I can tell you that. Okay then. Apparently we have dogs. We don't have dogs, but we have dogs. All right. Who let the dogs out?
Who? I mean, who?
Okay. I think that's passed. See what I mean, folks? Just stuff just goes wrong.
It does.
Hey, you get what you pay for.
Exactly.
And nobody pays for this, so it's okay.
This is what you like it.
That's the joke.
I know. John, what about you?
I'll echo everything Maggie said. Will generally make me not like something. I'll add on to it the other half of what, in my opinion, they got wrong in the 90s, which is I generally don't like superheroes who kill. There are exceptions, especially if they're using it to make, some sort of commentary. It can be done very well. And the Punisher generally gets grandfathered in for that. But just the idea that, not to completely go off on a tangent, but when Zack Snyder, for example, rolls his eyes at people who thinks that superheroes shouldn't kill, because of course they would kill. No, they're not real. I'm not reading comic books to see a realistic depiction of what would happen if people put on spandex and beat people up, because there is no such thing as a realistic depiction of what would happen if people put up spandex and beat people up, because that doesn't happen in real life.
There's plenty of realistic things that happen. I mean, just look at all the conventions we don't have this year.
Right. But I like maybe this is just me getting older, but I do like a level of fantasy in it, in my depiction of it. I like I can accept the whole, libertarian paradise fantasy of the individual who is more equipped to deal with society's problems than society. But then once that crosses over into, and therefore watch me murder all these people, it's generally something I don't like. There's not very much, to my mind, not very many stories you can tell. In that, and so I generally leave that out.
And the whole point of being a superhero is you save people, you don't kill them.
Right.
It's the difference between an action hero and a superhero in a movie.
Exactly.
An action hero shows up, the first thing they do is beat up or kill a bad guy. The superhero shows up, the first thing they better be doing is saving a person. Otherwise, they're not a superhero anymore. They're just an action hero who dresses weird.
There are a lot of those out there, sadly. If you don't save a cat at least once out of a tree, you ain't no superhero.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, are there any comics in the past or currently that you wish you hadn't read them?
Killing Joke. I remember.
Really?
Yeah, I remember when I read it, I thought, wow, this is so dark, and I was really taken in by it, and it was a much more twisted version of the Joker than I was used to seeing, and I was really struck by that. But the more time has passed since I've read Killing Joke, the more I wish I hadn't read it, because to be perfectly honest, it kind of grosses me out, and I mean, it led into, Batgirl becoming Oracle. And she was that for a very long time. So it was definitely influential in the Batman universe. But I think it's just because I feel like I've become really saturated with the dark and really violent, especially in Batman kind of stuff, where it just has to be the nitty gritty, dark and depressing all the time thing. And I'm kind of over that. 16-year-old me would have been all over that stuff. If I had read Killing Joke when I was 16, I probably would have loved it.
I did read Killing Joke when I was 16.
Yeah,
and I loved it.
And that would have fit, where my headspace was. But I've grown since then, and I've changed since then, and that kind of thing just doesn't appeal to me anymore. And now it kind of leaves a bad taste in my brain.
I think even Alan Moore has fallen out of love with Killing Joke. He does not like that it is in continuity. What
really?
He was trying to make a general statement that was supposed to just exist and then moved on from.
Yeah.
And I think I'm of two minds on Killing Joke. I think there are artistic merits to it, definitely, sure. And it's an interesting idea to look into, but especially with the basic fridging of Barbara. I mean, There's absolutely no agency for her, and her only purpose is to motivate other people to act a certain way. And that's not Alan being a terrible person. That's Alan being an individual writer at a time when a whole bunch of individual writers were doing that kind of story and not really paying attention to how many other people were doing it. So they're
gonna go rescue someone. Apparently.
Red alert.
Yeah.
For me, mostly what I don't like about it, if I read it, and this is not my answer, by the way, but what I don't like about it is it started the Joker off on a path to just be the super serial killer rather than the clown prince of crime. And it's the difference between that. Well, if you want an example of how it works tonally, watch or don't watch the Killing Joke cartoon and Mark Hamill's depiction of the Joker in that compared to Mark Hamill's depiction of the Joker in the Batman the animated series. The Joker should be funny.
I agree.
You need to be that's the only reason the Joker works as a character, is that he's funny and unpredictable, not just that he's going to come in and kill 50 people before you're able to stop him.
Or shave your face off or something
or
like that.
Cut his face off or staple it back on or whatever the hell else happened in the New 52.
Yeah, that was pretty gross. Yeah, I agree. I like a more, I want to say, whimsical Joker. I really like in Harley Quinn, the DC app cartoon that they've got right now with Kaylee Cuoco doing Harley Quinn is phenomenal. And the Joker in that is really funny. It's kind of like when ABC did that updated, more adult version of the Muppets. It's kind of like that, but with Harley and the Joker, and I really like it. Yeah, and Killing Joke just doesn't work for me anymore.
I'm going to just say Sins Past as my answer and then move on, because if I have to explain why, I'll have to remember that Sins Past is a thing I read.
Oh, boy. Okay.
I also wish I could read the Wikipedia description of Identity Crisis. But I had to read it when we covered OMAC, and that just makes me cringe all over. Why would you put that in a comic book? I do not understand that at all. That's just that is crossing way too many lines for me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, how large or small is your physical comic book collection?
That's a good question. I'm looking. We have a couple shelves and a couple short boxes.
Yeah, we're down to 3 short boxes and 2 small shelves full of various graphic novels for physical amounts. I used to have a rather sizable amount. Part of it was damaged in a flood up north, unfortunately, and the rest I just kind of gotten rid of because, well, it was only once when I moved over five, the first time I'm like, okay, I'm never moving that many long boxes again. So we're pretty far down on physical.
Thankfully, the like we've already said, thankfully we now live in an age where Comixology exists, even though they're owned by Amazon now. But whatever, where you can have your digital collection and not have to really worry about it. And I know people are like, "Oh, but you don't really own them," and I'm like, "I paid the money; it's in my collection. As long as the servers don't go down, I own the damn thing."
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not renting. Okay. Yes. Comixology Unlimited is amazing. If you want to pay a monthly subscription service to be able to read, quote unquote, because they actually use this term, quote unquote, borrow and return the books, fine. I'd rather spend specifically for trades, whatever the trade prices are, 19, 20 bucks, whatever it is, or trades on sale, because they do trades on sale all the time. So, yeah, I own that, and as long as the servers don't go down, I still own it. It isn't like it's being taken away from me because it's digital.
And if it ever does, then I'll just start over.
Yeah, I suppose.
Or if Comixology ever does go down, I guess the Pull Bag will finally have its end point, because I've never podcasts I've done in the 11, 12 years I've done them, I've never actually set an end point for this show. Because this show, because there's so many comics, there's so much old and new, so much to talk about, so many different things. The show can go on forever. Obviously, whenever I end up expiring from this unearthly plane we live on, especially nowadays, my goal is to hopefully at least get this podcast 500 episodes, maybe. Ooh. And, if I had my regular setup, we would have been, this is 382, so we're like 18 away from 400. So yeah, I probably could have hit 600 before the end of the year if I had my computer right now.
Dang.
I'm a machine.
Indeed.
Okay. Heaven forbid anything happen, but say the house, the apartment, the whatever burns down, but everyone's out safe. You guys are out safe. The pets are out safe. All that stuff. What's the one comic you could never live without? Like one comic you would run back in to save.
Yeah, I would not leave Bone behind. Those baby possums and Bartleby are coming with me, and I'm so glad that I have them in my head forever. I have become so enamored with that story. It really blew me away. Just these tiny little characters with big noses and like barely any clothing have this awesome fantasy fairy tale story and adventure. I would definitely grab our Bone. Ooh, or the JLI omnibus. Oh no. Probably Bone over JLI. I have to. I'll be honest.
I will grab the Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man Treasury Edition, because that was we bought that on our wedding day.
Yeah, I guess maybe that should have been my answer. I'm sorry.
And it was the first one that you and I covered on our show. Yeah. And I will always associate it with you.
Aw, lots of sentimental attachment to that one.
Unless the other Treasury one was closer, because I like that one better. But
our true colors really come out today.
Superman and the Amazing Spider-Man. We will cover that one someday.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most money you spent on a comic or a comic item? So either a book or a statue or a Funko Pop or whatever.
Well, the most expensive comic we own for sure is that Treasury Edition that you actually just mentioned, because that was like, what, $50?
I think we spent $50 on that.
Yeah.
We overpaid.
But it was a local comic shop, so we're happy to support them. But that's probably the most expensive comic we own. I'm trying to think about anything else.
I spent $25 on Dark Empire #1 from a comic shop back when, because that was when it was the first new Star Wars thing in so long. Mm-hmm. And I had missed it when it came out, and I started with number 2, and they had number 1 behind the counter there for $25, and I'm like, damn it, here you go, take my money. Turns out I could have just waited all of this time for Rise of Skywalker and gotten the exact same story, but
I like to think Dark Empire was better. It was more expertly done. Rise of Skywalker is good, but Dark Empire is better.
I definitely think J.J. Abrams read Dark Empire before he made the movie.
A film director reading something? Really? Not to say no film directors read things. It's more I still have nightmares from Revenge of the Fallen, and it only got worse after that. Anyway.
The More Than Meets the Pod podcast, their coverage of the Michael Bay movies are an absolute scream to listen to.
We watched all those movies in one day.
For them, it's the incredible adventures of Michaela being stuck in this horrible movie.
What I absolutely love, and I'll have to, once again, send this to you guys if I can even find it. I think they're still doing it, or they might not, but they did a number of them. There's this show called Tranquil Tirades. It started as a blog, but they turned it into a podcast. I don't want to say blog, but it was like written reviews of. Basically, the premise is they take bad movies and try to put, intellectual spin on them or try to dissect them intellectually, kind of thing. And they did, I think, the first 3 Transformers movies. And these 2 guys, James and Damien, they are not Transformers. Like, they're basically non-Transformers fans. They're movie fans, but they're not Transformers fans. So it was so refreshing to listen to each of those episodes. I think they clock in at 2 or 3 hours each or whatever. But it was so refreshing to see it from a non-fan's perspective. And it's hilarious. It's so funny. I'll have to see if I can find it and send it to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Was there ever a moment when you were done with comics? So up to this point in your entire life, were there, like John, you mentioned earlier, I hit high school and I discovered girls and yada, yada. So bye-bye comics. Was there ever a moment like that?
I haven't really yet come to the point where I'm done with comics. I'm done with certain aspects of it, but it's not going to prevent me from continuing to read them because I am optimistic about where comics are going. Most of the stuff from the 90s I'm probably not going to read. They're not that there aren't stories from that decade that I wouldn't read, but a lot of it is so over the top to me that I'm just not interested in it. But I wouldn't say that I've come to a point where I'm done and over with them. They're kind of going to, I think, casually be in my life for quite some time.
There were a couple of times, for one reason or another, I stopped. I think during the most egregious period of the 90s, I wasn't buying too many things, especially once Peter David's Hulk was done. Mm-hmm. And then after Infinite Crisis, and not specifically because of Infinite Crisis, but I think right around there, I just stopped reading them until the New 52 started. I was into more other things, and my life was going through a bunch of things. And somewhere in the New 52, I came back to comics sporadically and seriously did write about Rebirth.
I feel like we've already answered this one. What are you reading right now, and what do you think our listeners should check out? Let's see. Everything we've already talked about. Maybe I should move that question.
Yeah,
besides Bone, Maggie, are you reading any?
Well, Matt Fraction's Jimmy Olsen, I'm really looking forward to getting back into for sure. I would highly recommend that. That's coming from someone who despises the character of Jimmy Olsen. Coming full circle and absolutely loving it, because the whole point is that it's Jimmy Olsen but cranked up to 11, and it was written for me. It's like Matt Fraction knows Maggie Schaefer does not like Jimmy Olsen. I'm going to write this for her, and I've loved every book of that I've read so far. I think that's the most current.
I'm not reading much current stuff. Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk, Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. I am reading, and
I got to finish that Daredevil series.
And Dan Slott's Fantastic Four I enjoy, especially it's getting good again. It kind of had he came out of the gate with that. It was like, I finally get to write Fantastic Four. I'm gonna do it. And then he put Galactus and Doctor Doom in like his first story. And then I should slow down a little bit. So it took him a bit to build back up, but I really enjoy I enjoy anything Slott does. And he obviously likes the Fantastic Four, and he has an interesting spin on that, so that's fun.
One of the things that I've really liked about podcasting with comic books is that the comic books I read, I tend to read for a show that we're going to be on, whether it's for one of our own shows or to be on somebody else's. And honestly, that's been kind of a cool way to read them, because it means that I'm going to be reading a wide variety of different books from a lot of different eras, depending on what we feel like covering or what we've been asked to cover with somebody else. Like I hadn't read Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which I still need to rectify. But last year when we did our Halloween crossover, we did Calliope and Midsummer Night's Dream. Those were the first two books out of the Sandman series that I read. And I was glad that at least I got a little piece of that. So I can say at least I've read those two stories. I read all the stories too. The one with Metamorpho and the Dream of a Thousand Cats. It still blows my mind that Metamorpho was in there. Not Metamorpho, but the woman who was
Element Girl.
Yeah. So that's one of the things I like. For this year, we're going to be doing a Moon Knight. I'd never read Moon Knight before, so I read my first Moon Knight issue just recently, actually, and I thought that was really cool. The art in Moon Knight is really neat, very striking with the white and the black. Bone, obviously, we're going to cover that too, and I just finished that, and I loved it. Highly recommend it. It did win 21 awards, so obviously it's worth reading.
Conan the Barbarian is
that's right. You've been reading that
hell of a lot of fun.
Oh, is it?
My God, it's in the most recent one. He's in what is basically the Tomb of Horrors with a bunch of random other adventurers. Kidding. It is so good.
I might like that. I might have to read that. Conan the Barbarian is another one that I'm like, I don't know if I'd be interested in that. And I'm sure if I picked that up, I'd probably like it.
Yeah, for the Pull Bag back in the day, 2015, so 5 years ago, we did two Halloween specials. One was Halloween, one wasn't. The first one was we did Angel's Smile Time. They adapted the Smile Time episode of Angel into comic form, which was even more hilarious than the actual episode. The episode is amazing. I love that episode of Angel, but they did that, so we recovered that on the Pull Bag. And then for Halloween in 2015, we did something called Angel Masks. I'll have to look it up later, but yeah, for the longest time on this show, I've wanted to eventually do Batman the Long Halloween on Halloween, but it has never come to pass at this point. All right. Heroes, heroines, anti-heroes, heroines, robots, or villains. What archetypes are your go-to reads?
Heroes for me.
Yeah. Because I really like the villains as well. I really like a good villain. Like Megatron is an amazing villain. The Joker, even though I feel at this point I'm a little over the use of the Joker.
Starscream.
Starscream. Oh, Starscream's great. He's such a good villain. He's hilarious. He's the best villain. So I do really like a good villain, but I'm definitely going to be more interested in the side of the hero or the heroine. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, this question comes from me because I have one of these stories, not with comics, but with toys. When I was, and people who have listened to this show and any other show on the Geekcast Radio Network have heard this story for the last 12 years. So this is just for you guys. When I was 6 years old, my parents got divorced when I was 2 in 1982. So in 86, I had for some odd reason, I don't know why, I had all my Masters of the Universe hero toys with Castle Grayskull at my mom's place. Snake Mountain and all the villains were at my dad's place. Don't know why. Whatever. Well, at 6 years old, one day my dad said, "You're too old to play with toys," and sold all my villains.
Oh, no.
Including Snake Mountain. So This question, do you have a parents got rid of my comics story? Because one of my parents got rid of my toys years and years ago.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. I'm so glad I have not had that experience. I've had the opposite. My mom was always really good about, do you want to try reading this new thing? Go for it. You're 8 years old and you're going to try to read Dante's Inferno. Why not? Just go for it. But I don't think, my stuffed animals never got taken away from me. No, I never had that happen. My mom was always like, nope, you do you.
My brother took all of the Transformers that I owned and wound up selling them.
I thought he took them for his kids.
That's what he'd like to tell you, but...
Oh, that's sad.
Original Optimus Prime.
That is heartbreaking.
It's very sad.
I love you, Jason.
You're a good brother.
All right. What is one item from a comic book you'd love to have in the real world? So, like Green Lantern's ring, the lantern, Batman's batarang, that kind of stuff.
Well, that batarang is apparently very versatile, as we have seen throughout Batman's history. That batarang can do many things. If I wanted something, I'm going to go with the first one you said, the Green Lantern ring. I have always thought that would be so much fun to play around with. I mean, protect the universe with.
I'll go more pedestrian and a Quinjet.
Not a bad choice.
Quinjets are cool and they can go anywhere, including other galaxies.
Apparently so, yeah.
Very cool. All right, we're almost done, folks. I know this has felt like torture, hasn't it? Number 24.
Myself. I've been enjoying myself.
There you go. If you could create any comic storyline, what would you want to create, and what characters would you want to create it with? Now, this is if DC hired you both, Marvel hired whoever, or not just hired you. Let's just say they gave you permission, because heaven forbid anybody make a fan film these days without getting anyway. So basically, what characters and what story would you want to tell with those characters?
One of my favorite and I feel underused characters from DC Comics is Kismet. She hasn't shown up a whole bunch, most notably in the JLA Avengers crossover. I think that's the biggest one, I think, where she was a part of, although she's more used in Superman stories. And I would kill to get to tell a story with Kismet. I love the idea of, first of all, it was the art of Kismet that first drew me to the character. I think she was stunningly drawn. And the idea of the DC universe being encapsulated in this feminine form that is the entire DC universe. There's something about that just makes me want to give Kismet a hug. I love that idea so much. And I appreciate so much of what the DC universe has given me. It was particularly with Batman, just because he has resonated with me for so long. So if I was going to write something, it would definitely be for DC. It would definitely be a Kismet story. And I would want to use as many of the magic-y people like Phantom Stranger and Spectre and Constantine and Zatanna, Dr. Fate. I love those characters. Swamp Thing, I would want to include. I just use all the crazy characters, all the magic-y ones, but it would all be centered around Kismet.
Very cool.
Yeah, mine's along similar lines.
Is it?
Yes, I would have Kang and Morgan Le Fay go back in time to the Marvel 1800s and transform the world into some sort of magical, techno monstrosity, and all of the Marvel Two-Gun Kid and Rawhide Kid and those people would have to team up in order to fight them.
That would be pretty cool.
Either that, or one I just thought of while you were saying the other one.
Okay.
I want to write a story about the Supreme Soviets in 1989. Like the Soviet super soldiers as the Berlin Wall falls, and then their fallout with them having to deal with the fall of communism and how their lives are changed and all that stuff. Mostly because I think Ursa Major, the man bear, needs to be in more things because he's a Russian And he's a bear. His name is Ursa Major. The big bear.
That's so cool. Comics are silly. They've got some amazing things.
But I actually do think that would be an interesting take to really deal with. Because deal with the fact that the entire aspect of them is that they're commies. Well, now there's no communism. What are you going to do?
Absolutely.
What are you going to do?
It's so interesting to me that I believe comics do it better sometimes. Now, I know there are some film or television adaptations that are really good. When you take a real life story and adapt it as a graphic novel, like George Takei's They Called Us Enemy. Oh my God.
Mouse.
Wow. Yep. I think IDW is just now announced, or they announced a couple weeks ago, that they're going to be doing a Tiananmen Square graphic novel. So yeah, I love when comics like adapt the real life story into a comic, because especially with kids today, like they didn't live through, like I barely remember Tiananmen Square. I mean, I remember seeing it on the news and stuff, but I don't remember. CNN was so much better back then. Anyway. All right.
No,
What were you going to say, Jeff?
I can tag on to that. I really agree with you on that. I am such a history nerd. I mean, I love the stories that exist in history that just are untold, and I am all for different adaptations of that. Even if you want to take liberties, like the musical Hamilton is one of my favorite creations of anything that exists, because partly because, well, it's a work of musical genius, but besides that, it makes you want to check out these stories, and it's fun to really look at it in the terms of the artistic license he takes, like which aspects of this are true and which of these you'd be surprised to find aren't, or I mean other way around, which aren't true and then which are. And it's really neat to go and do that, and I love that when things like that, and if comic books can serve that purpose to people who wouldn't normally find out about these stories, I am always glad when they exist, especially when they're written well.
Yeah, I think with the advent of Hamilton, finding new ways to tell historical events is kind of important. I think history is something that's important for people to learn, but it tends to be delivered in such a dry textbook kind of a way that if you can take a real life story and give it color and give it, dialogue specifically from a character, I think it's a really good way to get people into that story and almost put them in a character's shoes and have them go through that event, through their imagination, rather than just be told a bunch of dates and names.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. And the final question is, what is the one piece of advice you would give the comics fandom?
Lighten up. Would be my answer. Try not to take it so seriously. It obviously, these are stories and books that mean a lot to people, and these are characters that a lot of the fandom have been following for many, many years and through childhood. And it's hard to put that sentimentality aside and that sort of nostalgia that really affects your perspective on things. And when stories start to change or evolve, that's okay. You don't have to claw at for the old stuff for it to remain the same. You can allow things to change and get better. I would say to just lighten up a little bit and try to enjoy yourself and don't focus on the hate so much.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if there are 3 fucks in Hamilton Disney Plus.
Oh, jeez.
Seriously? Really? Okay.
Is that bothering people?
No, they.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That censorship really bothers me too. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of censorship. If you don't want to hear it.
I agree with Maggie. People should lighten up. It's fiction. If you're not getting joy out of it, go back and read some that you are. Mm-hmm. You are wasting too much energy going on negative tirades and joining up with people who have really strange ideas about why things are happening and what things need to be happening.
Absolutely. And I'm on board with you guys. It's all for the fun and enjoyment. It's for, you know what? Say what you will about the band Creed, but their song Higher is a song about escape. And if you can't make your great escape into comics, then I don't know what kind of enjoyment you have in your life, because comics are for everybody. Comics, no matter whether you're 60, 70 years old and remember the old days, or if you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 now, growing up with whatever whatever kids comics they have now, because certain comics most definitely are not for kids, and that's okay, because as I said, comics are for everybody. There's something in comics for everyone, whether it's giant robots, whether it's holograms, whether it's DeLoreans, whether it's capes and cowls. It doesn't matter. There's room for everybody.
Well said.
Yep, definitely agree.
All right. As Thundercracker decides to fly by, here's the point where you guys can pimp out all that Rod Pod content you're not creating.
I promise I'm going to edit an episode right now.
Yes. In addition to the Rod Pod episodes we haven't been putting out, we have doing several other things under the General Married with Comics banner. Lately, we are almost done with this. We've been doing kind of a chapter at a time thing of The Wounded Sky by Diane Duane, which is my favorite Star Trek book.
Oh, and it was so much fun to read. We've been doing that with Lane from, I always get it confused. I would just want to call her Batman Books, The Dark Knight in Prose.
Yep, we're doing that. Once we do that, we'll go back to doing some comic book related things. Maybe get back to a couple of the Encyclopedia Brown stuff. Because
yeah.
I keep getting people are like, "Are you guys going to do any more Encyclopedia Brown stuff?" I'm like, I suppose we probably should. So, and definitely for Mike's sake, if for nobody else's, we will be getting out some Rod Pods. Yep. Pretty soon. But otherwise, in Transformers related stuff, I every month do a Transformers Chronicles the Marvel Years over on Longbox Crusade, where we cover the Marvel Transformers comics in order. Maggie is on plenty of those as well.
Sure am.
And we are there with Pat and Delvin. And
hi, Delvin.
We have a good time talking about this stuff. And you can find us on Twitter. I am at MWC_podcast.
And I am at Maggie and the Rain.
No I in.
No I in.
All right. Anything else you want to say before I go through my diatribe?
Till all are one.
Till all are one.
There you go. Thank you for joining us inside the Pull Bag. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on this and all of our other episode content. Please comment on the website. It's dying, sadly. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. And yes, I know I just pulled a wheelie. Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, the home where our files live, Spreaker. You can also use Stitcher or any other podcatching client you prefer. We actually prefer Spotify because I've been told by our people behind the curtains that Spotify listenership for our shows here at the Geekcast Radio Network is actually the most popular listenership that we get. Leave the show's feedback in iTunes or on Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called now. When we started this whole thing, it was just iTunes, damn it. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Geekcast Radio for the network. The show is at The Pull Bag, and I am at TFG1Mike. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network, and you'll also check out The Pull Bag over there as well. And Married with Comics is on Facebook as well, so you can go check out their page. All the links will be in the whatever I put on the website post or whatever it is. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Oh boy. Whoever thought that central air out in the Pacific Northwest, no central air out in the Pacific Northwest was a bad idea is just evil. Anyway, for now, I am TFG1Mike with
John and Maggie.
John and Maggie.
It looks like John forgot his own name for a second.
I was looking out the window and enjoying the wind that was just blowing in for that 1 second. It's going to be a hot one here today.
Yeah, not having central air in the Midwest is just as bad as not having it in the Pacific Northwest.
It's okay. I know you're not supposed to talk about weather and things in podcasts, but this is the end of the damn show, folks.
Yeah.
it's one of those things where we moved out here and yes and whatever, but they're like, yeah, no, most apartment buildings, most houses, unless you put it in, whatever, yeah, it doesn't come with it because we have the whole reason why we moved out here from the Midwest, because we were in Chicago adjacent, was because my wife wants to be on the coast and she loves the temperate weather. If it gets above 65 degrees, I puke. There's just no way around it. I just can't handle heat anymore. And even though I know you guys are suffering because you guys have that heat still, it's coming. Somehow this whole virus that we live in now has moved the weather pattern where the heat is traveling west instead of going from west to east. It's, oh God, it's just so bad. As of this recording, I am facing 2 100-degree days. No, I can't do it. Anyway, sorry, folks. Make your great escape into comics. I don't know when episode 383 is going to happen. I'm not sure. It depends on if I can find recording and editing monkeys to be the guests next time. Who knows? I don't know. It very much is one of those things where it's an adjustment. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. Go check out John and Maggie's Married with Comics, the Rod Pod. I know it's the Long Box Crusade, but what the hell's the name of the Transformers thing over there?
Transformers Chronicles. The Marvel.
Marvel. There you go. I knew it had something to do with Marvel. I swear to God, I'm losing my mind. I feel like I've lost it years ago.
And just embrace it. It's a lot more interesting once you do.
I suppose.
All right, folks, we're out of here. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
You've just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, the GCRN's first comic review and discussion podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate and leave a review for the show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Become a fan of us on Facebook, facebook.com/thepullbag. Send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @thepullbag and @geekcastradio. So until next time, make your great escape into comics and unleash the geek in you.